This is the Actor and the Engineer podcast. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go.
Wow.
I just want to do it differently.
No, that's cool. I felt the anticipation.
Your face is so funny when I do stuff like that.
Oh my God, it's different than normal.
That's half of the pleasure, to be honest with you.
I like things that are very settled and calm and not hyperbolic. So when a movie like this comes around, it's pretty extreme for me. But we're going to talk about Malcolm and Marie today. It's the new movie by Sam Levinson. He wrote and directed it, and it stars two people. Stars John David Washington and Zendaya. It's about a director and his girlfriend. They come back from a movie premiere. And it's pretty much real time type thing. You know, it's variations on different arguments that they have and just them reckoning with their relationship after a movie premiere that he wrote and directed. So that's the plot, but that's not really what this movie's about. It's just about kind of a roller coaster ride of crazy emotions up and down and left and right.
It's Zendaya, by the way.
Got it.
And okay. I'm all about her right now because I just discovered and finished watching Euphoria, which is also Sam Levinson. He is also the showrunner for that and the writer for that and also the director and writer for this.
And the son of Barry Levinson.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. How bad could it be, right? I mean, who we have not talked a lot about on this podcast. We have not talked about his father a lot. So maybe we need to have a Barry Levinson day one day because he has put out some incredible movies. And I see his son doing some really incredible stuff. I love John David Washington and I love Zendaya. And we have been caught in this vortex of plays being produced into movies, and this is the opposite.
I heard about this movie over the summer. It was made in June. There was this sort of like special dispensation made for the production of this film because it was in the height of coronavirus and Hollywood being shut down and nobody was producing anything and nobody's doing anything, but they did this extreme situation where everybody all piled into one location. It was shot in Carmel, California, just south of San Francisco, around Monterey and all that. And it was in a house that is known as the Caterpillar House. They just went up to this lady and was like, "Hey, we love your house. We want to shoot a movie here for a couple weeks." And she said, "Sure, no problem." So they got there and stayed there in this compound for 2 weeks before they started shooting. And then they shot. And then they stayed for an extra 2 weeks and got tested and all that stuff. So that right there is an interesting story in and of itself, has nothing to do with the movie. But that's the first I heard about it, and then I forgot about it. And then when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, okay, I'm actually much more interested in the film now. And I think a lot of it had to do with it being shot in black and white, it being shot on film. It's actually shot on the same stock as The Lighthouse. They used the 35 millimeter Kodak XX film stock. So that's the kind of grain structure, the same kind of grain structure you see with The Lighthouse. And it also requires a lot of light. So they kind of used that somewhat to their advantage sometimes. And then also they played around with that, especially in some of the outdoor scenes and stuff. So yeah, that intrigued me a lot. And just the kind of ambiance that was set up in the trailer, I was like, okay, this is interesting because you could tell that there was going to be some histrionics in this film. So I wanted to see how they were going to deal with that. So yeah, that's what got me actually interested in it. Whereas you're coming to it from you saw Euphoria, this is the Euphoria creator, this is Zendaya, so you are on board.
Hook, line, and sinker. And I've spent a week in Monterey, by the way, and that is a beautiful town.
Yes.
I always want to say caramel, but
Carmel.
Yeah, Carmel, right? It was a joke when I was there. I was test marketing movies, and we took a movie there to test market, and we had to get an audience together and show them the movie to see what and how they're going to market this movie is basically the idea of it. And I was blessed enough to spend almost a week there, and that is a beautiful town. Absolutely gorgeous. And I think if I remember correctly, Clint Eastwood back in the day was the mayor of
Carmel. Yes, he was the mayor of Carmel.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. Did you go to the Monterey Bay Aquarium?
Yes, I did.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, I did. Yeah, amazing. They have these really cool indoor-outdoor things where like the tank is half in, half out, and you can look over a patio parapet, if you will, and look into the tank as well as look through a glass through the tank at certain places.
That's
beautiful,
awesome.
beautiful country. Beautiful. It's really cool because they have that sea mist that happens in the morning and it kind of rolls in off of the sea and comes up, and literally you can see it going like whoosh up the side of a valley if you're lucky enough to be up that late or get up that early.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's beautiful country. And now that you say that that house is where you say it is, that makes perfect sense to me because it seems like a house in that area.
Yeah, Steph and I, we lived out in California for about 3 years. And then like the year that we knew we were leaving, we were like, oh my gosh, we haven't gone anywhere. So we went to like LA for the first time, and we went to Monterey, and we went to different parts of San Francisco and up and down the PCH and all that stuff. So it was quick trips, but yeah, our time in Monterey was great too. And yeah, the aquarium's awesome, but we're getting way off subject. But the set itself, the house itself is a character in the film. I mean, you can say that they're able to utilize the house in a bunch of different ways. The one key feature of the house is that it has windows everywhere. It has a really wide open kitchen moving into the living room, moving out into a patio. And I think that Sam Levinson and his cinematographer, Marcel Rev, uses that really well. But I have some shots I want to talk about real quick before we get into like the meat of the thing. But I thought it was a great introduction to especially John David Washington's character, Malcolm. There's like an unbroken single take that is outside of the house, and it's a dolly shot that just dollies back and forth and back and forth. And it starts off with Malcolm dancing to the James Brown song Down and Out in New York City. And then finally Marie comes into the living room as he's dancing, but the whole time the camera is outside the house and it's dollying back and forth. I thought that was really cool, and it is a seriously long take. It's multiple minutes long. So yeah, it's a great way to introduce us to the energy of the two characters and the mood of the two characters and the fact that Malcolm's not picking up the mood of Marie at that point. I also thought it was interesting that with that particular shot, it was very methodical in that there was a whole scene, it's mainly a monologue. Marie doesn't say much in that scene, but Malcolm's going around the living room, and as he's circling the living room, the camera will either, on one pass, on one circle, it will follow him, and on the next pass, it will stay on her as she's outside smoking. And then it alternates back and forth and back and forth. I thought that was so well done. And actually the dialogue works because she's always on camera when she's talking. And so just the choreography of that is pretty cool.
Yes, I think the opening of the film and the end of the film are two of the best moments in the film. So as for that shot, I did notice that. I was like, wow, that is really cool. And I think it does speak to, I think you're right, it speaks to the different characters and where they're coming and what energy they're going to bring to this event, this elongated fight that they both come into. And you're absolutely right. It's interesting because of the way he shoots it, you know that John David Washington is not paying attention to what Zendaya or Marie is thinking, and he is not aware. And that is huge because that's pretty much the thing about their relationship. He is unaware of what he should be aware of by this point in their relationship. And then she spends the next hour and 45 minutes pointing out to him how much he is unaware and why. And it's well done. There's a couple of shots like that I thought were really telling about not only the structure of the film, but what the characters were going through. And I think that's hard to do. I think when a director does that well, it's just part of the feeling of the film. But when a director does not do that well, it's heavy-handed and you notice it. And it's like, why am I noticing what the camera's doing right here? I'm not noticing what the character's doing. I'm not noticing. What am I supposed to be focused on here? Sometimes people are too clever for their own good. I think he handles it really well.
Yeah, and then he kind of tells the audience by shot choice and shot length after that what they're supposed to be feeling, because right after that we move into choppier shots and more close-ups when she is getting into really working on making them the mac and cheese. So I think that they're kind of like teeing us up for the first big back and forth that gets into a more of a fight. But But this whole film, it's kind of like it ebbs and flows. And the thing that I loved about it is that you find out very quickly is that we don't know everything about each of the characters. And Sam Levinson meets out information in small portions throughout the film that makes each of their peaks and troughs, each of their volleys, it makes each of them a little bit more complicated. And you kind of feel like you've got them all pegged. You've got him pegged, or you've got her pegged, or, you're able to be able to go in there and be like, oh, well, she shouldn't be feeling like that, or he shouldn't be feeling like that, or man, he was way wrong, or she may not have understood where he was at, or you're able to kind of like at least lean to one side and lean to the other side and be able to kind of get pushed around by the information that is given to you. And I thought that was really cool because we're so used to being able to peg a character, like, oh, that's the bad guy. He's bad because he has a British accent, because it seems like a lot of bad guys have British accents. Or he's the good guy because he wears a white hat. We get that ground into us as moviegoers, and this one is trying to kind of like push you one way and then push you the other. It'd be one thing if they were just yelling at each other in the same way for an hour and 45 minutes. That would be exhausting. But this film, I think, does a little bit better than that. I haven't seen many movies like this. Have you seen, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? That's kind of the one that's teed up, and I know that people have talked about that, but also the fact that it's in black and white, so you can kind of make those comparisons there, and just the emotions that are shown on screen in both of the films are very comparable. But still, do you have any other comparisons for this?
No. And that's kind of not in my nature to do anyway. It's like when somebody says it's kind of like Fight Club, but it's the Matrix. It's like, What? No, this is not the Fight Club or Matrix. This is this project. And I get why people say stuff like that. It's a selling technique. It's a way to understand something. Virginia Woolf definitely came to mind, not just because of the black and white, but because of the intense relationship scrutiny analysis that this couple goes through. The thing that I thought was really interesting, above and beyond everything you just said, is that Zendaya and John David Washington are contemporary actors who are of a certain age where they draw in a certain age range of people to watch. So, she used to be a Disney star, and then she was in Spider-Man, and she has a mainstream career. And then she does Euphoria and blows everybody's mind, including her own, because she could not figure out why he even thought of her, because there was nothing in her career at that point that had proven that she could do something like that. Probably why he was so interested in her, to see how far she could go in that. And she goes there. And it does speak to that generation. There's a few things that they say in Euphoria that are specifically comments on that generation. And I think that's brilliant, because what it's doing is it's introducing this style of film, this style of play, because this could be a play. It could be done in a theater, and it might be in the future. That would be interesting to see if it ever takes off in that direction. Usually it's the opposite direction. It's usually a play first and then it's a movie. So I'm just happy that they've decided that the audience is smart enough, the audience is aware enough to take all of this in. People who are in their 20s to 30. Well, he's what? I think he's
35,
36 in real life. John David.
Yeah, he played football
so
for a
he's like
while. So he's only recently started acting, full time, but he played football for a long time. Yeah.
Well, the point to all that is that it's bringing this style of dialogue, film, interaction, character study to a whole nother generation that might have skipped it because they don't like older movies, or they're not as interested in the theater as the generation before them. I'm not saying that that's true. I'm not saying I know anything about somebody who's 20 to 30 years old, whether or not they like theater or not. I've seen a ton of people that age love theater. I'm just saying it's nice that that didn't inhibit them from doing what they did. They went there. They go there in this film. And it's probably in a way going to help some people that there are movies out there like this, not just, Tenet. Not that there's anything wrong with Tenet. I'm just saying that this is not Mission Impossible. This is a serious drama between two characters, and it's complex and it's heavy. And so I'm just glad he brought it to the screen so we get to see that kind of stuff in it, and people of a certain generation get to be exposed to it, because how else are they going to be if somebody like Zendaya doesn't do something like this. You know, somebody who has the name recognition and the now obviously she has the chops and now she has significant award recognition. So it brings it to another generation. So I'm glad about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's all kinds of memes out there with the macaroni and cheese and all that. I mean, that's the thing that people are grabbing and gravitating towards. And yeah, I mean, that's just another character point, is that he's literally yelling at her across the house while eating the mac and cheese that she made for the both of them, but he is eating all of it. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty on the nose, but yeah, at the same time, I don't know. There's all kinds of really nuanced things in this film. Yeah, I can't tell how much energy people are going to put into watching the film, but that doesn't really matter. Just the fact that they're watching a movie in black and white, watching these actors going back and forth and seeing the performances. I mean, there are certain aspects of their performances that are like, you're right, they do go for it. I mean, John David Washington is just, he's hyperbolic. When he's out in the backyard and just kind of like, I don't know, parrying and thrusting, like he's just like punching the air and he's going all over the place. And, you know, similarly, there's a scene where Zendaya is just transformative. That's somewhat of a spoiler, so I don't want to necessarily get too much into that, but you get to see their range. You're right. Even though I'm not a big actor-y type person, the things that pulled me into the film were not as much their performances, but it's the interaction between the camera and them. I thought that the way that they're able to utilize the house as a set and be able to kind of essentially do the same thing over and over and over again. The main things they're changing are the specific setting, the shot selection, and the amount of information that we learn about each of the characters. But really, it's just the same thing over and over and over again. And it's still engaging. So that's difficult. So do you want to get into spoilers or what do you want to do?
Yeah, we can. Sure. Okay.
So finding out certain things over time, they kind of talk early on in the film about his lack of jealousy and his interaction with the star of the film early on, and you're kind of like, okay, well, that makes sense. You know, he does have to spend time with the star of the film, and, you know, it's not a big deal. But then you find out somewhat early on in the film that she is an actor, and she decided to not act anymore. And he brings that up in they're kind of having they are having an intimate moment, and he's like, I can't believe you stopped acting. And it's kind of like, wow, you really didn't see that. But it's that kind of drop of information that we get that you're like, okay, now we know that there's a whole nother door we can go into. So I thought that was really cool. There's multiple scenes like that. There's the scene with the nail scissors, and it's like, okay, come on. He goes through this whole procedure of telling her why the movie isn't based on her, and then that very specific element is in the film. So that's something that they both know. We don't know that as an audience.
Well, it says a lot about an artist, in my opinion. Self-involved, narcissistic, histrionic is the term you used earlier, and this could be Malcolm and Marie, aka Histrionics at its best. It could have a subtitle to it, but I think it's interesting that an artist takes and shares from his life or her life and takes from other people's lives around them, but doesn't see the fact that they've done something like that. All the way to the fact that he doesn't understand why she's upset. Well, of course he understands why she's upset that he didn't thank her, because that's kind of the catalyst to everything, that he didn't thank her in his speech at the premiere of this movie tonight. And so instead of just going, I was influenced by you and what happened to you, it's actually more complex than that, because then you find out later on that a lot of things that she has actually said were influenced by her life were actually not influenced by her life. These are things that had happened to him, and that it just seems to be that he keeps getting attracted to the same type of person, and that these people have these similar things that happen in their life. But at that moment, when he can't just take a second to go, you know what, I never saw that before. I guess I stole that from you and never even thought about it. Thanks. End of movie, of course. The end of the movie would be right there. And the movie would never take place if he had just said thank you, which happens all the time, by the way. Men forget to thank their wives all the time. And not to excuse it, I just find it interesting that the one person that should be like at the top next to maybe Jesus and your mom is your wife. So like, how does it always get forgotten? And like all the time. So That's probably, I was going to say, that's probably where the idea for this movie came from, but that's not based on any kind of facts. So I can't say that. But if that's where the one idea came from, it's a smart idea. So I just think it's a statement about each of their characters. Instead of just saying, yes, you influenced me and thank you for taking from my life, and then respecting the fact and appreciating it, that I guess that would make them well-rounded, healthy human beings, and we wouldn't have all of the stuff that happens for the next hour and 15 minutes afterwards. So it is, and it's fascinating that it's as specific as a nail clipper or nail scissors. It's not just a nail file. It's not just something, it's something different than what you would traditionally think of. And I guess that's the point to a degree. It's so specific. It had to have been taken from her life because that happened to her. She knows it because she did it. So it's a very specific detail that actually explodes all over the place throughout the whole entire film. And it is what kind of juts them into the big first epic when you actually know they're fighting. Because in the beginning of the film, they're kind of discussing it.
She's just not talking. That's all. And then she's kind of like, you should know why I'm mad.
But she should.
Yeah.
I'm like, go back and watch the beginning of that film again, John David Washington, Malcolm. Did you see the way she walked into the door? You should have known then. You should have turned around and looked at her then. I find it interesting that filmmakers and screenwriters can take such a small detail and turn it into something that is much bigger than that, because then it explodes into something even bigger.
Yeah, there's multiple scenes in there where, I mean, the scenes that are actually a little bit more cinematic to me are the kind of like when they're trying to patch things up, or when she's allowing him back in and being more accepting of his advances, because there's certain scenes where they kind of like a make out scene on the couch, and I think it's before she takes her bath, but it's shot in a way, it's very similar to the where they use the dialogue of a particular scene or a particular take, but then they intersperse it with different cuts of the same scene, but different takes. So you hear them talking to each other, you'll hear him say something, but then on screen is them kissing, or on screen is just, you see him not talking. I really like that, because it's kind of like a montage, or kind of like, there's something similar to that in like Out of Sight, where the scene at the airport bar where George Clooney sees and meets up with Jennifer Lopez, and there's a sex scene, but then they're talking about the sex scene before they go, but then it's intercut between them talking and them in bed. And then I think that there's another that I think was based on another film, the Nicholas Roeg film, Don't Look Now, with Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland. And I think they're both very similar, where they're kind of showing you something on screen, but then you're hearing audio from something else, or you're intercutting different scenes together. And I thought that was a really cool, interesting way to do that. And then another one that I thought was really neat was we kind of get this, it's after she's taken her bath, she's laying on the couch, and we see the cameras just kind of steady on both of them. And then the camera anticipates his movements. The camera kind of like raises up. I mean, it's probably on a crane or something like that, or maybe it's a steady cam, but I don't know. But it's a very smooth move where it raises up and it kind of points down towards just her and a space next to her on the edge of the couch, and he kind of falls into that space. And I really like that anticipatory camera move where it increases tension and then releases it. And it's not tension as in like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But it's just kind of like visually we feel this like, okay, something needs to change in this frame for it to feel good, or for it to feel right. And then when he falls into frame in that position, it all fits. Sometimes you see a scene like that where you see like an empty side of the bed, and then somebody like rolls over and then falls into frame, and it's like, oh, well, okay, that's, it was an empty frame and now somebody's in the center of that frame, and okay, that feels good or looks good or is the right thing. But yeah, I thought both of those scenes were really well done. And then there's a couple other scenes that the framing of the film is really well done. I mean, some of them are just static shots, whether it's like them sitting outside and in chairs, and she's smoking and he's moving around. It seems like he's a little bit more frenetic than she is. She barely moves at all, and he's kind of wriggling around, and they're both in chairs. But and that's when she plays the song "Get Rid of Him." The music in this is awesome too. We can get into that too. But yeah, their music choices are amazing. I don't know how much Sam Levinson, how much stuff he had built into the script, but him, along with the music supervisor, which is the person who is picking the music to use in the film, the pre-recorded, previously released music in the film. It looks like they have a music coordinator, Satya Fuentes, and a music supervisor, Jen Malone. So both of them, amazing job.
Well, I think probably the music was picked purposefully, obviously.
Oh, I'm sure. But I just mean, like, sometimes, like, Quentin Tarantino, for example, has music written into the script, and it's like, this is when we're going to hear this song, and it will be this song, because he has enough clout and they've got the money to buy whatever songs they want to buy, or the licensing for those songs. But in this film, I don't know. I mean, sometimes you kind of like come upon a song as you're editing, for example, or you might have temp music in there and then you pick a totally different song. So yeah, I don't know.
I think this movie strikes me as a type of film that it's already pre-planned, that they knew they were going to use that song, and of course she reacts to it and he reacts to it, just like they talk about her body type. She talks about her body type, and the body type that she has is written into the script. I mean, it's not an objective thing or an objectifying thing. It's the fact that she's pointing out that her body type is different than what he is usually attracted to. And it's an interesting point about relationships. Why are people attracted to certain types, and then they are in these intense, loving / Virginia Woolf, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf relationships with people who are not their type? And it's clarified by what she says. So I think that that's interesting. I think you go with what you know. And as a matter of fact, I don't know how far into Euphoria you are, but it's almost like Marie is the character from Euphoria, just 5 or 6 years older. Although it's a different character. It's obvious the way Zendaya plays Rue in Euphoria is completely different than the way she plays Marie. I mean, she's very introverted, and her whole body type in Euphoria is hunched over and sucked in, and she's very antisocial and she almost mumbles a lot of her stuff. But Marie is very confident and she stands up straight and erect. And the way that Zendaya plays her is completely different. But there are similarities to the characters. They both were drug addicts. They both overdosed. We said spoilers. A lot of people who are addicted to drugs and are in rehab or trying to be in rehab just don't want to quit. They don't want to go to rehab because they just don't want to quit. They don't like their life enough to like want to recover.
Yeah, they don't want to fight for themselves.
They want to be a drug addict.
Yeah.
Right. But because they're okay with being a drug addict. Yeah. It's the rest of the world and how their world falls apart because they're a drug addict. And Marie kind of strikes me as that same type of person. And she does later on say something to that effect. So I find it interesting that you're bringing up these shots that one I noticed, but it's a shot to you. You know what I mean? Like it's a way the filmmaker decides to do something. And to me, not that it isn't to you also, but it wasn't an emotional reaction, because when she's on top of that couch and he falls down below, first of all, she's on the couch and then she goes up onto the back of the couch.
Two different shots I'm talking about.
Then he falls down into that shot.
There's two. That's a different shot, but I love that shot. That shot looks amazing where she actually gets up onto the side of the couch and lays sideways on the couch and she's backlit. Oh my gosh. Looks really cool. So yeah.
So that's not where he falls down to the ground underneath her?
No, he pulls her on top of him, I think. That's the shot you're talking about.
You're right.
But there's a shot where he's kind of like bloviating and he's just, da-da-da-da-da. And I think they're talking about the Los Angeles Times critic again. And he just kind of like is spent and he's like, boom. And he kind of crashes right next to her. But before he crashes, the camera kind of points to where it would frame where he's going to be and her, and then he ends up hitting the mark after the camera's already made the move. And I think that is purposeful. It's kind of like a chord that's kind of like a dissonant chord, and then it resolves into a nice, a very clean chord. So yeah, that's the feeling that I got. So you're bringing up some stuff that's actually pretty scary to me, because there are songs that I've listened to that I have no idea what the words are. Like I just don't know the words. I could sing the notes. I could sing each note of the song, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what the words are or even what the song is about. And similarly, I can watch a movie and I can appreciate the movie, and I'm at risk of enjoying a movie separate from its subject matter. So I have to kind of like key in on that. So subject matter is an ingredient in the cake, as opposed to the only thing. That's one of the sprinkles on top, as opposed to being the cake. So it sounds like for you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like for you, that's a very, very important part, whether it's the acting. Because for you as an actor, I would think that like having the words to say and the emotions to perform is the thing. But for me, it seems like having the visuals and the sounds and those coming together in a cohesive manner and providing the audience a journey, like that's the thing for me.
Fascinating to me because those songs are specific.
That's true.
And she even says you put on a song that you thought was going to be an apology, but it was a song for another woman and another time, and you think that it hit me this way, but it didn't. So it's a specific song. So I did recognize, I was like, is he trying to apologize to her and still have his Quentin Tarantino movie where he gets to dance really cool like Uma Thurman does across the floor in Pulp Fiction? Is that what he's doing here? Because she's not going to hear you, dude. Like, she's just not. And then also the couch scene, regardless of which one you're talking about, I don't think I noticed the shot because I was so involved in what he was saying about the critic. And then when she says, because I thought to myself, of course it's a good review, and of course he's picking it apart for whatever reason. He has specific reasons that are about his world that he's upset with this writer about what she writes, even though it's a rave review. And the whole entire time he's ranting outside about it, I'm thinking to myself, that is so like a theater film person to be bitching and complaining about a good review. And the way she goes, Malcolm, it's a good review. Like, it's a great review. Did you not hear any of that? All you heard was this. Like I said, legitimately, I think he has a beef if he sees it that way. If he sees what he spoke about that way, I think it's a legitimate thing that he's upset about. But it's still a good review. But he does say that a certain crowd probably won't come see this movie because of this review. Or if she uses this word in her review, then that's going to cut out this part of the population, because then they're going to be like, oh, why would I see that if it's this? And it's amazing to me that artists are so specific about their art that it transposes into something as specific about being worried about a demographic, because a word a reviewer uses in the paper is going to stop that demographic from coming to see your film. It simultaneously makes sense to me and frustrates me at the same time. He spends all that time to get the review and then starts to read it and he freaks out about it. So you're watching the shot and I'm relating to the emotional center of an artist being so temperamental that even a good review sets him off. That's what I was paying attention to. And the fact that they surround themselves by well-balanced people who go, Malcolm, it's a good review. What is wrong with you? But yet he's the artist and temperamental. And so I'm not saying I can relate to any of that or I've done any of that. I'm just saying it was fascinating to me. And I think what's interesting about this filmmaker is that you're right. Those shots in a silent film would indicate those things. That's what you would be feeling emotionally if you didn't know what the dialogue was going on. So I think it's kind of one and the same, but we're just looking at it from two different points of view.
Well, you know, you say that he's the artist. Well, she's also definitely an artist, because there is that scene when she comes out and he's kind of laying on the floor and she's got that knife and she comes out there and I was like, all right, okay. Here's the next layer. Here's the next step. This is what's going to happen. And yeah, it was just a complete amazing performance where she says that's authenticity. And it's just like, whew, man, that was scary.
That's what you get with authenticity. Yeah. She says that to him, that this is why you should have hired me, basically. What's fascinating about that scene to me is, one, I should have known because I'm aware of Zendaya's talent at this point. But for a split second, think she was making that up. I thought she was for real going to stab herself or stab him or do something. And the clicking of the knife is, talk about tension building. Yeah. And we've seen that before. That's kind of like a reused trope where somebody goes into something and they're just acting to prove that they can act, or to prove that that person is gullible and believes any lies that, they're told. And that this is to prove to him that she had the authenticity to bring this role that's played by another actress to a deeper level, because she can say that to him all she wants and he's never going to hear it because, he's in his own mind. But until she shows him, and then I love how genuinely human his reactions are most of the time. It's like, well, damn, why didn't you audition for me? Like, damn, that was good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why didn't you do that? He has a couple of moments that bring levity to the film that I think are important.
Oh, he's hilarious in this movie.
Yeah. He's something, but that moment is transcendent. It will be the moment that people show when they say, oh, Zendaya can act? Yes, she can. Watch this. She can act, So it takes it and puts it to a whole nother level, not just as an actress, but as a character too. So yeah, it's an important moment.
Yeah, I did want to talk about the end, and once again, another amazing choice for the song, the Outkast song Liberation at the very end, and the way that it very slowly, we see Malcolm waking up and going to find Marie, and then we just stay on that shot in the bedroom where we get to see them. I mean, it's a great shot of, amazing foreground, background, action in the background, really cool backlit. They're backlit, kind of have like silhouettes and stuff. And then the way that song kind of kicks off, and it's just it's a great, to me, that was a cool ending. And I got sucked into they're gonna hold hands, like he's gonna reach out his hand and but that's not what this movie is. This movie is not the movie where they hold hands at the end. So yeah, I don't know. I was expecting like a Hollywood ending, and it's like, this is not a Hollywood movie. I mean, I know it's a movie about people who are in the industry, who are in Hollywood, but it's not a Hollywood movie for multiple reasons.
Well, I thought at first I was upset that she didn't leave because, it's indicated that she's left. You can't see her in the bed. You can't really see her side of the bed too well, but then he reaches over and he realizes she's not there. And I thought, oh, she left. Okay, I'm going to like the fact that she left. And then when he goes outside and finds her and then she just kind of looks at him, I was like, yeah, I like that too. I see why he ended it like this. So I don't know where you want to go from here, but I got a couple of questions for you because I think that in the end, you dug on this movie a little bit more than I did. So what's the difference between watching something like this and not being bothered by the fact that it's play-like in its form, but the Ma Rainey's Black Bottom or One Night in Miami rings of it being a play first and then put into a movie? So what's the difference between the two for you? Because I thought for sure you would bring that up, that this does not feel like a play. It does not feel like it was transposed from a play. It feels like a movie.
Yeah, I think that I was having a harder time grasping onto filmic elements of those other movies. I think Ma Rainey's Black Bottom actually does. To me, I was more interested in some of the shots in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom overall. But I'm also looking at them from the angle of there is pre-existing work that they're having to differentiate themselves from. Because they could just set a camera on a tripod and point it towards the stage, and we could just watch the play from one camera. So like, what differentiates going to a play of One Night in Miami or going to a play of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and seeing a movie version of those two plays? So you have to differentiate yourself somehow. And I think both directors in each of those two did that. Whereas this movie, there's no pre-existing work to compare it to. Just because it has two characters and one setting doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be considered a play. So I thought that the shot selection in this and the use of music in this, most of the music in this film was diegetic, like was within the film, except for a couple of times when I think there were some extra pieces of music and kind of ambiance type sounds. And then obviously the last song of the film. But yeah, I think that there's like maybe a different, an expectation thing going on there where there's like a hurdle that has to be overtaken for plays that were converted to film. So I want it to be cinematic.
Yeah. Okay, so do you think that if you didn't know Fences was a play and then saw the movie without that knowledge, would you know it? Would it run past your mind? This seems like a play to me. Like this seems...
Yeah, I think I might have... See, I think that particular film, it wasn't as... that had a few different dynamics to it because, it didn't have the detriment of just being set in like one night. Or, I mean... Both One Night in Miami and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom are essentially only hours long. And Fences takes place over a certain period of time.
I just find it fascinating because I can sense that Fences was a play. I can sense that One Night in Miami was a play. Remember, I said if this wasn't a play, it should be, but I can sense it. And I could sense that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was a play. And then I thought when this started, I knew it was two characters, one setting, one night. I was like, is it going to feel like a play? And my theory was that the reason why it takes a modern day audience a little while to adjust is because we're not used to the amount of dialogue that comes from a play. Because it's one setting and four characters, there's an amount of dialogue that's not in your traditional one setting movie. And I use The Breakfast Club and Free Fire and all those things as examples of movies that are all set in one place, but not heavy dialogued like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, or there weren't these extensive monologues. But then Malcolm and Marie comes along, and it is exactly what I was saying that I thought modern day audiences might not connect to. It is heavy monologued. It is heavy dialogue. There is the vocabulary in this movie. There's a lot of parodies going on in Twitter world. There's a great parody of a guy who's the neighbor of Malcolm and Marie. And he's like, hey, Malcolm was up all night again screaming about Barry Jenkins. You have neighbors, Malcolm. You have neighbors. It's hilarious. You should see it. It's so funny. It's filmed in black and white. It's so funny. Yeah, it's hilarious. And then I kind of rewatched part of the movie and I thought, well, it doesn't look like they have any neighbors because I don't see any houses around them, but who knows? So I was just curious about that. Okay, so my ultimate question about this movie is, and I don't want to sound derogatory because I liked a lot of this movie, and I think Zendaya was transcendent. She was a revelation. She was a powerhouse. She is amazing. And I think John David Washington does some really great work. I have some issues with some of his over-the-top moments, but I'm also two-folded about that because I so understand why he does the things that he does, because as an actor, sometimes I'll do those things to try to get there, to try to feel it, and he went there. So I can't really bash on him, but it is a scene-chewing performance.
Yeah.
Just the way he eats the macaroni and cheese and the way he slams his fork down into the bowl. I'm like, nobody eats macaroni and cheese like that.
Well, and his guttural breathing, even when she's on the bed and he comes in and he's kind of confronting her and he's just in between words, he's kind of huffing and puffing, that kind of breathing, intense breathing. Where you're like, do you really need to breathe that hard? But I mean, he's obviously feeling it at that point. So,
and bold choices will win out for me every single time because I understand why he's doing what he's doing. I don't think it 100% worked for me, but the ultimate question for me is, what is this movie really about? Why are we watching this movie? So let's go back to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. For me, that's about an aging teacher and his aging wife who have come up with this fantasy world where they've created people in it that don't exist in real life. And then they take out their trauma on a younger couple who was them 25 years ago. But I have nothing to relate to an elderly or an older professor at a school who's married to a woman who's pretty much controlling him. I'm not those people. I have nothing in common with them. But what that play taught me, what that movie taught me, was that not everyone can carry the weight of the world. Not everyone can deal with this existence the way that keeps them healthy. So some people come up with imaginary things to make this world easier to breathe in. So that's what I took from that movie. I can't relate to any of those characters. And that's a crazy ass movie. And those people are, they are on the spectrum of wow. I mean, I wouldn't want to hang out with them on any level. But I pulled something out of it for me. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I have no idea what it was like to be an African-American woman in the late 30s as a singer. I have no idea what it's like to have written music and have somebody else take it and copy it without paying me. I have no idea what those worlds are like. But what I took from that is that an artist needs to create, and what you take from it and what you honor them with is up to that person, not me. The fact that I can create and the fact that I'm an artist is what I took from that movie. Same with Fences. Fences is, about an African-American couple where they have a situation that occurs. The father doesn't like his son. Of course, that's 90%, so everybody can relate to that on some level. But there's nothing that I can relate to in the specifics of the story. but yet standing true and doing the right thing ultimately is the best choice. That's what Viola Davis's character does. She makes the right choice at the end of the film to do something that most people would never want to deal with. But yet she does the right thing because you're dealing with another human being. You can't just dispose of them. And so she does the right thing, even though she's not required to. So I took something from that. So I watched Malcolm and Marie, and I'm following it, and I'm watching it. And it's about 20-something-year-olds, 30-year-old, really good-looking people who are making movies, and they're mad at each other because of all of these reasons. But why am I, a middle-aged guy in Virginia, watching this movie? What am I supposed to take from it? And ultimately, I don't have an answer for that question yet. And I know that you're looking at the movie differently than obviously I was. You're looking at the shots and what they meant, stuff like that. But for me, in the end, I feel like if they were just 10 years older, if they were in their late 30s, and this was the middle of his career, and that she had given up acting after 10 years of trying, and then this part came along and she didn't get it. Something about them being younger had less weight for me. And that's the only thing I can think of that might have made it that much more interesting to me. So I'm not asking anybody to answer those questions, but for me, I did have a question at the end of the film. What is this movie for? What's the reason why I'm watching it? And I'm an artist, and I'm an actor, and I understand a lot of those emotions and those feelings, but what is it? What is the reason why Josh Knapp is watching this movie? You know what I mean? Like, it feels like it's missing something. And, waited to the end of the podcast to put out my semi not positive things about the film, but I do have a lot of questions.
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things. So do you feel
Too
like...
many questions, Mr. Wayne.
Do you feel like it's missing that thing that it says in the film itself, authenticity? Do you think that it's missing a grounded... Because, I mean, why did he make him a director? He's obviously a proxy. Yeah,
he is.
Malcolm is a proxy for Sam Levinson. So, I mean, you have a writer-director writing a movie about a writer-director. So you can't extricate them from each other. So it's going to be about, everybody's going to look at, and we haven't even gotten into this, but everybody's started talking about how, he's putting the words into John David Washington's mouth. So you can assume that anything that Malcolm says is what Sam Levinson says. But that's not necessarily how writing characters works. But he kind of put himself in a situation where people could very easily say that. They could say that, whatever that guy is saying on screen is what Sam Levinson believed. So there's been all kinds of think pieces about Malcolm and Marie and why it's ill-conceived and somewhat pointless. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that you're right. He's an artist. He wants to make art, and this is his art. And his art is writing roles for actors who he knows can do well, can knock it out of the park. He doesn't give himself... That's the other thing, is that usually a superhero movie, Avengers, you've got all kinds of crutches. You've got Robert Downey Jr. and you've got Chris Evans, and they can each help each other. And you've got Mantis, and you've got Scarlet Witch, and you've got nobody has to hold up the whole film, the weight of the film on their own shoulders. You can kind of spread the load. But in this film, I mean, he's kind of taking crutches away from him. He's like, I'm making a movie that that has just two characters in it, and literally just has two characters talking to each other. So you can very easily say that if one of these two characters doesn't work, then this whole film doesn't work. If this setting doesn't work, if the way that we shoot this setting doesn't work. I read an interview, I think it was Variety or Vanity Fair, I can't remember, but they're talking to Sam Levinson, and then they were also talking to Marcel Rev, and they were talking about how they shot the beginning of the film. Initially, they shot the first day, and then they looked at the footage after the first day, and both Marcel Rev and Sam Levinson said, this isn't going to work. We need to be more dynamic. We need to be more in their face. We need to be in the moment. We need to shoot it handheld. So the next day they came back and they were like, guys, we're just going to scrap the first day. We're going to shoot handheld from now on. So they shot handheld that second day, and they redid a few things. And then by the end of the day, they said that the cinematographer was just he was just dripping with sweat. They said he lost 10 pounds of water weight. And then they looked at the footage and it just wasn't usable. It didn't look and feel and act the way that they thought it would. So they once again changed course and went back to dollies, and they went back to, static shots. And so they were modifying, because each of those decisions is a huge decision. You can't just, when you have so few variables to play with, if you choose wrong with one of those variables, the whole thing's unusable. So I think that, in a lot of ways, he kind of wrote himself into a corner, and the fun is seeing if you can get out, successfully. I mean, I think writing a movie about a director is also writing yourself into a corner. He obviously had a lot to say about critics, and we can talk about that too, but about critics and the critics' role in art. And I'm sure every director and every writer has something to say about that, but he just decided to put it in a movie. So now we can dissect what he thinks about that. So he, in a lot of ways, he's kind of having his cake and eating it too, because he could very well say, just because I wrote a character who says all these things doesn't mean that I think these things.
Well, I also don't think that that's an actually good comparison, because he's talking, Malcolm is specifically talking about a black male director in Hollywood, and the way that the white LA woman critic responds to him. And so I can understand where somebody would say, okay, yeah, it's a screenwriter director, and this is about a screenwriter director. I can see those comparisons, but really, I think that Sam Levinson is writing for a character who is not 100% him. I mean, it's obvious because there are issues that a young black director would have that a young white director would never come up to. So I think that that's different. My point is this: what is the universal theme that draws us to this art form that we can take something from? What's the universal theme? There's a lot of themes in this. There's a lot of ideas in this. There's a lot of great emotional moments in this. Well, what was I supposed to take from it? And I'm not saying anybody should answer that question other than myself. I just find it interesting, and the movie is less thrilling to me because I'm sitting here questioning what I took from it versus instinctually feeling what I took from it. I was in it when I was watching it, but when I got out of it, I was like, what did I just spend an hour and 45 minutes doing? What was the purpose of this for me?
When you get done with the roller coaster, do you analyze what you got from the roller coaster, or do you just enjoy going on the roller coaster in the moment?
Yes, I do analyze it. One, because I am an analytical insanity driven person, because that's all I do is analyze everything, and I think there's meaning in everything, and sometimes to the point where I even nauseate myself over just enjoy it for what it is, Paul. It's just a popsicle. It's like a grape popsicle, dude. Stop analyzing how the wood feels different in your mouth than the old popsicles when you were a kid. But if the roller coaster is an interesting analogy, because when I do get off of a roller coaster, what happens to me is I say, okay, well, that upside down loop was much more interesting and thrilling than just that over the hill through that cavern thing of that other roller coaster. So yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. So I enjoyed the roller coaster ride when I was on it, but I also felt like there are other roller coasters that allowed me to flow around and up and down and all around and take something from it after the ride was over with. And there were some moments that stopped me in my tracks where the roller coaster just came to a halt. And I'm thinking to myself, do I have to climb down from this roller coaster, or do I continue on this ride?
Yeah.
Like, why am I not fully engaged in this when Malcolm does his little like karate chop fit, where he's doing that, and which I love, and I totally understand as an actor why he made that choice, but it pulled me out. It made me think this is way too exaggerated as a moment.
For me, what makes that scene more interesting is the fact that he is doing his karate chops, but that's intercut with her in the bathroom taking off her eyelashes, because you're juxtaposing him acting out in such an extreme physical manner, and she's just containing all of her same emotions and has enough control of herself, physical control of herself, to be able to very delicately remove an eyelash. That right there is it's a cinematic display of extremes. And that's what I felt in that scene. It's like him chopping, imaginary ninjas doesn't mean anything compared to that and her together, those two shots together. Like, they're linked forever in my mind. You don't see that without seeing the other one.
So when you're watching that, do you fall on one side or the other? Are you her taking off your eyelashes, or are you him karate chopping imaginary ninjas?
I'm neither one. I'm the viewer. I can empathize with both, but I'm not trying to like fit into one of each of the characters. I'm not picking one side or the other. I'm processing. I'm constantly processing.
Well, that brings me to my last point. At the end of the film, is one of them right and one of them's wrong?
No, I mean, well, I think that's the crazy part, is that we've only seen 2 hours of their relationship, or however. I mean, there's a little bit of time difference, obviously.
Wait, hold on. Let's be more specific. Is she right that he should have thanked her?
Oh, sure, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
that was ever doubted. But the cool part is that I don't think maybe like the worst dude would think that like she should be lucky that he's with her. That's a little, come on, dude. That's
He kind of says something like that.
Oh, he does say
says
that.
something.
He does say
similar
like,
to that.
I took you to
Yeah, he
rehab.
does.
Yeah, he's like, I took you to rehab. I did
look
this.
what I did for you.
that. But then she counters
Yeah.
that. She counters that with like, of course you did, because you were just mining me for material to make your amazing film with. That she even says to him, yes, it's a great film. But at the same time, she's saying that it's like he's got a well. It's like he's staked his claim on this well and he's just pumping all the oil out of it.
Any guy who says, yeah, whatever, you're lucky you were with me tonight, that guy's a jerk. We get that. But there is a moment in the film when you kind of go, you know what? He just forgot to thank you. It happens. I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm thinking he should be more reactionary towards it, but he did just forget. He messed up. Now, obviously, the film is more complex than that, and that she proves to him, But it is specifically about that moment, and it has to be, because the ending would never work if it wasn't for the fact that she says, Marie, thank you for being there when I couldn't find the rewrite and you had to read 100 rewrites. Thank you for being there when I couldn't figure out what direction I wanted to go. Thank you for being there. And she gives him numerous amounts of thank yous that he could have said to her publicly at this movie premiere. And then at the end of the film, he says, sorry, thank you. And she says, you're welcome. So obviously that is a huge thing that is the catalyst for all of this film, and that there is, in my opinion, a right and wrong, who was right and who was wrong. And it doesn't mean that because he was wrong that she wins or anything like that, but she's correct about how she feels the majority of the film. I'm just saying that I find it fascinating that I took a side. I took her side.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it's her. I don't know, but I took her side.
I can see that. Yeah. Well, one last thing I wanted to bring up is that him making these statements, him writing a movie about a writer-director writing and directing a movie, in a lot of ways, he has, he's protected himself from critique, because he's already in the movie rebutting any kind of critiques of the movie. And him saying something like, why don't they compare me to William Wyler? Why don't they compare me to, whoever else, a non-black director? He's kind of saying he's protecting himself from anyone saying like, why do you think as a white writer and white director, you can write for a black character? Because it's the same argument. It's the same argument that a black director can't be compared to a white director, or a black writer can't be compared to a white writer, or whatever, or writers in general, non-race specific writers. So I thought that was an interesting way to frame it, because a lot of the critics are spending zero time talking about the movie and all of their time talking about the relationship of race between the writer-director and the subjects in the movie. And thought that was a little pointed.
So
specific.
Does that mean he can't write for a 17-year-old drug addict in high school? Because that's what he does in Euphoria. So I see what you're saying. I think that's a bogus discussion. Not meaning what you just brought up.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that to me is ridiculous. I think actually they're separate from each other. I think the issue that Malcolm has as a black director in the film is completely different than any issue that Sam Levinson has being a white guy writing about black characters. I think they're two separate issues because when you do watch Euphoria, there are two specials that they filmed in quarantine also. There's one about Rue and one about Jules, the blonde hair character, her best friend character. And the first one, it takes place on Christmas Eve, and I won't tell you anything about it, but there's a lot of issues in that episode that deal with race and an idea of what a black man goes through. And I had no idea really who Sam Levinson was. I just didn't put it together. Nor did I ever look up his bio, nor did I ever, I didn't assume anything about him. But after seeing that episode, I thought, well, he's pretty in tune to a lot of stuff because he's writing about stuff that's outside of his experience. But isn't that what a writer is supposed to do? They're supposed to write outside their experience. They're supposed to create characters regardless of whether or not they can relate to them or not. Now, the theory is that you're supposed to write what you know, but your path is filled with people that you don't have their life experience, but they were part of your story. So you're going to have to write about them. So does that mean that a gay man can't write a straight man, or a straight man can't write a gay man, and so forth and so on, or a woman can't write a gay man? I don't buy into that. And I also think that film Twitter has gone ballistic about this movie, by the way. And they're just cruel in a way. I've stayed away from it up till about 3 hours ago. I started reading some stuff and some critical reviews. I think it says more about the movie and what's lacking from the movie that people are spending time on a white guy directing a black guy or writing a black guy. If they're spending time on that, then ultimately, in my humble opinion, Sam Levinson didn't do his job right, because they should be critiquing the movie and what happened in the movie and what happened in the plot and what happened with the characters and that kind of stuff. I understand why somebody would do a think piece on this subject separate, but people are spending a lot of time on this subject.
Yeah, I think he might have also invited the criticism by being very specific against critics, by singling out critics. There's people that are focusing on the fact that a white woman critic, as opposed to, whatever. And it's so, yeah. They're like, why did he pick a white woman critic? Oh, why is it not a white man critic?
It says more about that person who brings up that subject than it does about this film. And maybe it isn't Sam Levinson's fault that they didn't get his movie. And maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that people are spending way too much time trying to figure out why or how somebody can do something if they're not what they think the person should be to do that. That's a waste of my time. It never struck me strange. I think it's a legitimate discussion that this director can have in this film. Malcolm, I can understand why he sees it that way. And I understand perfectly that it specifically has to be a white woman because of what she says to him, based on the fact that he's not only black, but male, that he's a male director, and that this is, because they're talking about the gaze of where your eyes go with this actress who's topless at this one point. And, Marie even says it later on in the film. Why is she topless? You're wearing this right now. Why would she not be wearing a top? And he explains why he thought that was a legitimate choice. And
he also explains away the fact that she's wearing a tank top, and he's like, well, you couldn't be seen in Chuck E. Cheese right now. So he's kind of like meta explaining the fact that Zendaya has a somewhat revealing shirt on at the time that they're even having that discussion. So yeah, I mean, he's
right. And I think it's a valid point. And from a black man's perspective, not that I know anything about that, he probably would have this hang up about this white woman who is the LA critic because of what she says to him at the premiere. Not because she's white and she's a woman. He doesn't hate all white women. He doesn't even hate this woman. He just doesn't like what she said to him, and that she even took words out of his mouth and put them in her review.
It sounded like she was saying what she thought he wanted her to say, which is not the way to go about it. Yeah.
I mean, we have no idea what other people's experience and why somebody would have that experience and what their influences are, but we know they exist. We know they exist because people say they exist. If a black man who's a director says this exists, it's because it happened to him. So to debate whether or not that should be in a film because the white man wrote it is a waste of my time, in my opinion. I can't debate that somebody can't write something because they didn't live it. That to me doesn't make any sense. But I also think it's wrong to try to make a director, screenwriter defend why he chose to point out that she was a woman and that she was a white. I think it's looking at the wrong issue. To me, that strikes me even more of a systemic racism thing where, of course, we're not focused on what the black man's saying. Of course, we have to criticize the white guy for making some offensive statement come from the black guy about a white woman. What? That's not what he was talking about. That's not what Malcolm was talking about. So, well, obviously I took a lot more from this film than I thought that I did. So I guess I have to shut up about what I was saying earlier, but something about this movie doesn't 100% work for me. But obviously the other thing that I felt was I don't want to watch Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf again. Yeah. I don't really want to watch Fences again, but I will be drawn to them at some point in my life to watch them again, because they are mesmerizing and there is something about them that's universal. Unfortunately for me, Malcolm and Marie does not, I don't come away with that same feeling.
You know, it's interesting. I was thinking about that, and I think that there's certain scenes, like there's a lot of movies where there's certain scenes that they just feel good when you see them, and they can be separated from the film at large. And when I think about this movie, I'm going to be thinking about those scenes. I won't necessarily think about the blow for blow back and forth. I will be thinking about that scene where he falls into frame. I'll be thinking about the right at the end of the film when the little finger symbols go off in that Outkast song, Liberation, and it cuts to black. I'll be thinking about John David Washington dancing around to James Brown, jumping up on the edge of the wall or whatever. So I just, those are the things that I'm going to take from this film. And so I know that's not very cohesive as far as like, I loved this film or I hated this film, or, you know, this film was perfect. This film had some great scenes and it had some really interesting visuals and had some great music choices, and that's what I'm taking from it. Yeah,
that's totally fair.
So, all right, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for Actor and Engineer Podcast, and we'll see you next time.